Well, hello there. Welcome to our weekly question and answer with your host, myself, Jasper Blake, head coach here at the My Endurance Hub. Um, we've had some incredible weeks here, and I got to tell you, I'm so excited. Our membership is growing so quickly; it's amazing, and we have people from all over the world. Today, I was checking in, and I could see people from Morocco. I mean, of course, Morocco's had an absolutely horrific last week. And, I was able to chat with the people there, and they said they're all safe, but they certainly have friends and family that have been affected. And so that was sad, but also amazing to see people from Morocco joining our group. There's people from India, there's people from the US, there's people from Canada. It's just so encouraging to see so many people jumping in to the My Endurance Hub space and hopefully benefiting from all the amazing content that we're creating for you. Uh, I've had a chance to chat personally with quite a few of our members and look at what goals they have, maybe for the end of 2023, but also heading into 2024. And that's been really fantastic as well. What I love is the sport of triathlon, endurance sports in general, have really grown across the world. It truly is a global event now. And I just absolutely love how sport brings people together. We may have different views on how the world should work. But when we get to sport, people are often very united in their passion for it, and I think that's just fantastic. So I see a few people jumping in here. It looks like we have Devin Adams. Welcome, Devin, and James Anderson. Welcome, James. Nice to have you both here. Just to give you a little idea of how this works, feel free to ask me any questions. These conversations are recorded for your own knowledge. I'm the only one that you can see on screen, whether that makes you feel better, maybe. But if you do have a question, just pop it into the chat function. You'll see it down on the bottom right of the screen. There's a little chat bubble. And that's the way I look at the questions. I take them in the order that they come. We've done our best so far to make it through everybody's questions. But if for some reason we run out of time, but you do have a question, just pop it in the chat. We'll put it into the general discussion. There's no such thing as a poor question. I know that's a bit of a cliche thing to say, but really, if you have a question about any aspect of endurance sport, chances are other people will as well. So don't be shy. Get your questions in there. As I said, these are recorded, and you can find all previous recordings in the back end of the My Endurance Hub space. And I'd also encourage you to check out all the other stuff that we've created back there. We have daily endurance moments, which are little sort of 3 to 5 minute tips on everything you can imagine, from how training works to how to change a flat tire. Lots of great stuff there. There's webinars. We have master classes with some of the most amazing people in the endurance space in various aspects like mental training and human physiology and nutrition. Lots of great stuff there. So please check it out. Let's jump in here because we already have a couple questions, which is great. Again, my name's Jasper Blake. I'm the head coach here at the My Endurance Hub space. I was a pro triathlete for, over 2 decades. I spent the last half of that doing Ironman racing, and now I've been coaching for 10 to 15 years. So lots of time in the sport. Let's get started here. Devin has a question. How do I make the jump to an Ironman from sprints and standard tries? So really great question. If you are brand new and you don't know what a sprint or a standard try is basically what they have at the Olympics now. And it's a 1,500 meter swim, 40K bike, 10K run. And a sprint generally is half of that. If you have grassroots event, they may make the sprint any length they want, but typically it's about half of that. So 750 swim, 20K bike, and a 5K run. So how do you make the jump? Well, it's a great question. I would say if you're brand new to the sport and you're just dabbling, you're getting into sprints and Olympic distance, don't be in a rush to make it happen. An Ironman is a great goal, at least over the course of a year and maybe even 2. So if you're brand new, I would spend your first season doing a sprint and maybe work your way up to an Olympic distance. and that's good. Wrap your season up with an Olympic or standard distance. Those are going to take between 2, 3, maybe even 4 hours for some people. So it's no small task, but giving yourself that time will allow you to really gain some comfort with the sport and some competency in all three sports. Now, how do you make the jump to a full? Well, extend your timeline. So if I was brand new and I was starting right now, it's the end of 2023, I would spend 2024 just getting used to all three sports, maybe do a sprint, a couple sprints, maybe even do an Olympic as my grand finale kind of at the end of the summer, at least the North American or the Northern Hemisphere summer. And then maybe in that 2025 or 2026 year, I'd plug in what Ironman I thought was good. So I'd give myself a really long timeline. And that just gives the body and the mind a chance to really train and adapt and get stronger and really be prepared for an Ironman. An Ironman is no small task. The fastest athletes now at the top level are sort of 7.5 to 8 hours generally. And that goes all the way back to 17 hours, and everybody slots in somewhere in there. So you have to really be ready to swim, bike, and run. For most people, 10 plus hours is probably a reasonable guess. So just take your time, have a program that's progressive, little steps along the way, sprint and then standard. Then you've got your half Ironman distances that you could do for a year or two, and then maybe an Ironman at the end of that second or third year when you feel really good. So I hope that answers that question. It's a bit vague. You need a good training program, and it needs to be progressive. Those would be the two things that I would suggest. And that's a great question. Thanks, Devin. James Anderson asks, what was the hardest city that you have competed in and why? Oh, that's a good one. The hardest city. Oh, I've had people ask the hardest courses, and I think there's been a few that have been the hardest for different reasons, not necessarily the ones you might think of. So often when people think hard, they think, hilly. That's usually what people think. But I love the hills. I was a smaller athlete, so I love going up and down hills. That was always a benefit to me. But the hardest ones for me, honestly, were when it was hot. So if I had to pick the hardest city for me, that was Kona. I did the Ironman World Championships a number of times, and it was very tough for me. I struggled in the heat. I'm a Canadian boy through and through, grew up with, hardcore winters. I prefer the cold. So anytime you threw me in a hot climate, I was not as awesome. So my body really struggled with that. Now, what I did learn over the years was that I had to go to those climates and adapt. So I would do training camps in Kona prior to the World Championships, and I'd spend 2 or 3 weeks in the heat, living in it, training in it. And so that was, my way, not around that, but that was like the smart way for me to do it. But even with that, I still struggled a little bit in the heat. So Kona is probably the hardest for me, and it's because of the heat. But there's been other, locations that have been challenging. I raced in Japan once, and we landed in Nagoya, Japan. Now, I came from a very small town in Canada. I fly in, and I'm arriving in a city of about 3 million people. I might want to fact check that. I'm not sure if there's 3 million. Regardless, it was a very big city. And I found that challenging because the usual pre-race prep that I take for granted in small rural towns in North America, where you can just go ride your bike and run, and swim in the lakes there, did not exist. We had about a week leading in where we really couldn't train that much. And I didn't bring a stationary trainer for the hotel. So that was challenging from a logistical standpoint, and just, not really knowing what to do when I had arrived in a big city and couldn't do my usual pre-race routine. I found that pretty challenging. I actually got lost. The day we were leaving, I went for a little run, and I got completely lost, and I had to, I almost missed my flight because I couldn't find my way back to my hotel. So, but that's a good question, James. I'll close it by saying definitely Kona, toughest for me because of the heat. Great question. I love it. Devin Adams, another question here. I saw a video of a guy slowing down at the finish, was almost passed by another athlete, and at the last minute, the guy slowing down pushed the other guy to win. What are the rules around making contact with other competitors? Wow. Yeah, James. He says, wow, amazing. Well, triathlon is a non-contact sport, unless you're in the water. I mean, often there's some contact there, but hopefully it's without intent, to hurt somebody. It's just by accident because people are kind of in there all together in masses. But this would definitely not be allowed. This would be a disqualifiable offense, I would assume. I don't know the incident specifically, but my guess is that if this was caught on video or if any kind of official saw it, the person doing the pushing would definitely have been disqualified. You're definitely not allowed to do that. That's not appropriate. Although a small amount of me appreciates the competitive nature of this individual. But another good lesson is don't slow down going into the finish. Finish it off and then have your sort of victory moment. I'd love to get my hands on that video and just see what actually happened, because that's shocking. That's rare that something like that would happen in triathlon. So please don't do that if you're just getting started. Aiden, thanks for joining us. Great to have you on here, Aiden. Why is there so much spandex in triathlon? What are you gonna wear? It's like the best type of clothing. It is a good question though. Why is there so much spandex? Well, the main reason is that it's faster and it's more comfortable when you're doing swimming and running. So spandex is very tight fitting. There's various types of spandex now that are more aerodynamic, certainly hydrodynamic. So how they move through the water is really important. Think of the extremes. Think of it, the alternative. The alternative, let's say you get in a t-shirt and board shorts, and you dive into the water. Well, that's going to be a very, very slow combination. It's going to take a lot of energy to swim with baggy gear. You're going to get on your bike, and that heavy wet clothing is going to be, stay wet through the whole ride. It's going to be super uncomfortable. You're probably going to get tons of chafing. Look, the companies now that make triathlon or running gear or cycling gear, they come at it from a high performance standpoint and a comfort standpoint. And so spandex is usually the go-to because it's a great fabric, and they'll weave other things into that fabric to make it more comfortable and faster. But that's the main reason. It's more comfortable when you're riding a bike. You can wear, a good triathlon suit you wear for the entire event. So you don't get changed. You wear it in the swim, you wear it on the bike, and you wear it in the run. It dries very quickly. So you come out of the water, you hop on your bike. It's dry within the first, 5-10 minutes probably. It's tight fitting. So when you're on the bike, it's very, very aerodynamic. And it's also quite breathable, like a thin layer of spandex is quite cool for the most part. So, then you get off and run and you're in the same boat. Usually the leg part of the triathlon suit is a little bit longer. So it helps you avoid chafing down in kind of the groin area, which is like the worst area to get it. In the old days, we used to wear Speedos and a very tight fitting top. And that was also very fast and quite cool as well. So lots of spandex. If you're new to the sport, you got to embrace it. If you feel a little self-conscious at first, don't worry. Nobody's looking at you. Everybody's just worried about themselves. You'll learn to embrace it because the alternative is very uncomfortable and very slow. So love that question though. It's great. James, thanks for another question here. James says, have you seen any crashes in any of the bike portion of your competition? Well, fortunately, throughout my career, which was 20 plus years, I never actually witnessed a crash during a race, which is so rare because I raced hundreds of events, many of them draft legal events where, 30 or 40 of us are all riding in tight quarters. And, we avoided the crashes, which was very lucky. At Ironman, no, I never witnessed a crash myself. I was fortunate enough in my own racing to stay upright. And I'm grateful for that, because sometimes it doesn't matter how skilled you are on a bike, it's just can be a matter of bad luck or being in the wrong place at the wrong time, or maybe somebody else making a poor decision. If you watch the Tour de France biking, these are the best cyclists, the best bike handlers on the planet, and they crash. It's just part of it. So fortunately, I never witnessed it, but have I been in races where people have crashed? 100%. And, I've seen some really unfortunate circumstances with athletes that I've raced against, some pretty horrific crashes, often involving cars, actually. It's rarely ever riders getting into it, especially in Ironman, where you have to keep your distance and have a little space between the riders. It's often cars who maybe aren't aware that there's a bike race going on, or maybe they are not paying attention to the road signs indicating a race. Often cars will not realize how fast we're actually moving on a bike. They may see a bike and think it's moving at 10K an hour when they're going 50K an hour. So some of the more horrific stuff I've seen are when athletes hit cars that maybe come out onto the course not realizing, that an athlete's moving that quickly or that there's a race on. So yeah, never witnessed it, but seen the aftermath. Had some close friends have really, really bad, outcomes from that, broken bones and stuff. It's a scary part of the sport. So, keep your head up, and looking ahead is often a great strategy if you're on the bike, looking way down the road. Sometimes we get fixated at the few meters in front of our wheel, but where your eyesight should be looking is down the road. Are there cars? Are there dogs coming out? Are there driveways that I need to watch for? Whether you're racing or on a training ride, always looking ahead will keep you ahead of the game. So yeah. James, that's a great question, James. Thank you. James has another question. Is there a brand of gear that you prefer? Well, yes and no. It depends if you're talking about swimming, biking, running, or another sport. What's really cool in triathlon in particular is it's a fairly new sport. I mean, not anymore. We're upwards of 40 plus years now in this sport, probably late 70s, so 40 to 50 years old. In the beginning, there wouldn't have been much. People probably mostly wearing swimsuits. But now there's been such a massive evolution in swimming, biking, and running gear. And all of the top companies generally make a really great product line. What I love are the smaller, innovative companies that, maybe they're not huge, maybe they're not a Nike or an Adidas or a Asics, but they're, usually fueled or the catalyst is some young entrepreneur who has a new idea and, creates something that's a little bit out of the box and probably struggles like mad for a few years to make that product come to reality. There's a couple great examples. One of my favorite is On Running. So the company called On Running. And a little quick story I think you'll appreciate. There was a guy I used to race with. His name was Olivier Bernhard, and he was from Switzerland, and we did many races against each other. I didn't know him particularly well, but I remember being at dinner with him a few times. Really nice guy, retired from the sport, and had this idea that he should put some shock absorbers on the bottom of his shoes. And this is early 2000s probably. And everybody thought he was kind of crazy. I think he was cutting up bits of plastic or even like cutting up bits of like garden hose or something weird like that and gluing them to the bottom of his shoes and to give a little more shock absorption when you landed. And some of his early prototypes looked absolutely crazy. And I think everybody thought he was kind of crazy. Anyway, fast forward to now, that company, On Running, has a strategic partnership and some stock ownership by Roger Federer, greatest tennis player of all time, or one of them. I guess Djokovic is now, if you follow tennis. And their valuation, I think, just hit $9 billion. So, I'm straying from your question of what's my favorite brand of gear. I have lots, and I love the little startup stories of companies, especially in triathlon or running, that had an innovative idea. They were bold enough to take a chance at it. and have a crack. So On Running's, an amazingly successful story in that regard. But there's lots of other companies like, nutrition companies are one that come to mind. There's lots of different gels that get started or bars, and people have an idea or a concept and they go for it. The big players in triathlon, there's, 2 times U and Pearl Izumi used to be a big one. And Kiwami's another really good one. Lots of companies making really great stuff. So I don't think I have a favorite, but I probably have some favorites in the different categories. So that's a little hard for me to answer. If I was sponsored by somebody right now, I'd probably tell you that brand. Thanks for the question, James. Aiden says, I saw someone talking about a gravel bike. What's a gravel bike? Oh, we haven't touched on gravel yet. This is great. So, okay, let's go back to the very beginning of biking. Pretty standard road bikes. So early Tour de France pictures and, a standard road bike. This is something with fairly skinny tires and it's designed to be on the road. And then we get into mountain biking, some people taking their bikes off-road, and then the whole development of mountain biking. And mountain bikes have very, thick tires, big tires with treads, and they're designed to go off-road, and they have shock absorbing systems in them, front shocks, back shocks. And then there was a sport that has evolved quite big in Europe. It's getting bigger in North America too, called cyclocross. And cyclocross was this weird in between of road biking and mountain biking. The tires were kind of like a road tire, but a little thicker. They're like in between a road tire and a mountain bike tire. So cyclocross has been around for quite a while, but recently there's been a new development in the bike industry, and that's called gravel riding. And most of the companies now will make a very specific gravel bike. And a gravel bike, I would have to say, is kind of in between a cyclocross bike and a mountain bike. So the tires are quite a bit bigger than a cyclocross tire. And really, gravel riding is exactly that. It's finding roads that are gravel. And, I think a lot of countries just have an extensive network of gravel roads that you would never think about going on if you're on a road bike. But the beauty of a gravel bike is, you can get on there. The tires are thick enough to make it comfortable and smooth on gravel. You have a lot more freedom to explore different places, roads that you would never go on a road bike. And the bikes are set up to be kind of longer adventure type bikes. Some of them even have a little bit of suspension, to dampen some of the bumpiness of a gravel road. And people have taken this to amazing extremes, like gravel bike packing. So you might go for 3 or 4 days where you pitch your tent on the side of a gravel road that's in the middle of nowhere, and make an adventure out of it. So gravel road, for me personally, where I'm done with my professional racing, I don't do a ton of riding on the road. My next bike will probably be a really good gravel bike because you can ride them on the road, no problem, but it allows me to access lots of other fun terrain that I wouldn't be able to on a road bike. So, great question, James. Thanks again. This is so good. Lots of participation here. If you have to do a quick warm up, 2 to 3 minutes before doing a long bike ride, what would you do? Okay, that's a good one. First of all, if you're doing a long bike ride, the very nature of the intensity that's going to be involved in a long bike ride probably doesn't require an extensive warm up. Generally the longer the training, session you're doing, if you're doing a long endurance training session, you can kind of ease your way into the pace that you need to do for that training session. If you're going to do a high intensity workout, the warm up needs to be, very robust. So that's not what you're asking here. You're just saying, a quick warm up. You know what I would do? With 2 to 3 minutes, I would actually not even warm up on the bike. I would do a little bit of mobility work, maybe some foam rolling at home to kind of wake up those muscles, wake up my lower back a little bit. A little bit of mobility, maybe a tiny bit of, 15, 20-second little core exercises just to wake up my body. And, when you get on a bike, your body's kind of in this hunched over position where the hip flexor muscle is closed off a little bit. So I would do some stuff to warm up that's counter to that. It kind of wakes my body up, stretches me out a little bit. You know, that's the warm up I would do. And then, given the question you asked, which is like before a long bike ride, well, you're not going to get on your bike for a long bike ride and go as hard as you can in the first 5 minutes. You know, you're probably doing 15, 20 minutes pretty easy anyway. So that serves as a warm up. I hope that answers your question. I think, yeah, I would focus more on stuff that's off the bike. So a little bit of mobility, waking up those muscles, some foam rolling. And I think that's probably the best use of your 2 to 3 minutes before you actually get on the bike. Not sure how you're going to feel about that answer, but if you want something specific for the actual bike, maybe your question was, you know, what should I do on the bike? Well, just spend the first 2 to 3 minutes going really easy. You know, warm-ups generally should be really easy. There's lots of little physiological things that happen in your body when you're warming up, and you have to give it a chance. So, you know, just riding easy. That's another answer for you. Yeah. I like that question though. You know, I think maybe what you're getting at is, you know, a lot of us are pretty time crunched. You know, maybe we're not professionals, so we don't have the luxury of having an entire day to do our workouts where we can do long, slow warm ups. Maybe you've got like an hour at lunch, and you've got to get out the door. You know, so yeah, I'm not sure if that's what your question was about, but yeah, if the warm up has to be short, just make sure it's easy. Give your body a chance to really come into itself. So these are great questions. It looks like that might be it. I've got I had a question for everybody else in the group today, and that's whether you had a chance to watch the Ironman World Championships, the men's version of the race. Of course, the women are going to have their own race this year in Kona, October 8th, maybe. But the men's race took place in Nice, in France. Beautiful course, and that was on the weekend, I think on Saturday or Sunday. And I don't know if anybody tuned in, but pretty exciting. You know, Sam Laidlow from I think he's from the UK. He won it. He's just a phenomenal cyclist, and that course really lends itself to the top cyclists. Very tough Tour de France type style climb, you know, which is rare for an Ironman. Usually we're on flatter or rolling terrain, but this has like a really legit climb. And he just absolutely crushed it on the bike. He's quite extraordinary. He had great success in Kona last year. I think he was second behind Gustav Iden. So anyway, that was pretty exciting. I didn't watch the whole thing. It's a pretty significant time commitment to sit in front of your computer for 8 hours. But I did see snippets after, and it was pretty great to watch. It's a beautiful setting right on the water in Nice, France. So very famous race. I mean, it wasn't always an Ironman event. It was its own I don't want to say branded race. I think the International Triathlon Union actually used to put it on, and they called it the Long Distance World Championships, as opposed to the Ironman World Championships. So pretty cool event. And then, of course, the women's event, getting ready to go in Kona at its usual time, which is always the first or second weekend in October. And that'll be really exciting too. Women only. I think it's going to be great for them to have their own race. Lots of controversy around that one. You know, people are pretty split on whether that was a good decision by Ironman. I'm kind of neither here nor there, to be honest. I did love Kona, you know, having everybody there at once, but I think the burden on that community has been very tough. It's a very small community, and you have so many people coming in. And then, you know, obviously it's tough for the women because they never really get a chance to have a clear path, especially the pro women. But now they're going to be, you know, start to finish, it'll be a woman out in front, and they have clear roads, and, you know, everything's there for them, which I think is great as well. So we'll see how it goes. I think it's a cool idea to try and see how it goes. Not if there's any more questions here. These have been really great today. I actually really enjoy the Spandex questions, to be honest with you, because, you know, it's just funny talking about spandex. An odd clothing development, but essential. Very good. If there's no more questions, maybe we'll leave it there. I really appreciate everybody taking some time today to jump in here. James, nice to have you on board. Aiden, really appreciate you jumping in with some questions. And Devin, if you do have follow-up questions, gosh, please take advantage of the community we've created here. Pop it into the discussion section there, and we'll do our best to answer it in written form. And check out all the other stuff we have going on. If you want to review this recording, these are all stored in the back end as well of the circle. You can get it on the app or be on your normal computer browser here. So okay, I think that's it. Thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate you jumping in, and we'll see you next week, same time, same place, and happy training this week.